Lady's eating a piece of pie.
What?
Just like this.
And that starts out our podcast. We are recording. Hello, Nolwenna County. This is Marcus Harris with the KGCT Channel 25, and we are setting in Sweet Peas on Monday. What is the date, guys? Do you know what the date is?
16th, I think.
The 16th. So
Of December?
December.
Okay.
2019. It's almost over for us. This is our first podcast. We're going to be talking about what the concept that we've all kind of talked about was talk about some specific historical thing in Nolwenna County. And for this first one, since it feels like it's pretty easy, we decided to talk about the Savoy because I'm here with Paul Hughes of Capstone Music, and I'm also here with Shelby Black of Sweet Peas. And this is kind of we're thinking if we have a lot of fun with this and it's manageable, we might do this on a regular basis. And if you're an advertiser and you would like for us to come into your place of business and do a podcast, it takes about 30 minutes to set up and everything. It will in the future. This time it took forever, but
It only took 2 hours.
yeah. Well, we're at an hour and 25. But now that we've got everything sorted out, it'll be fine. So to just start out, I want to say thank you to our advertisers real quick. Park Villa, Barking Cat, The Depot Cafe, Doug Barnes Carpentry, Capstone Music, City Drug, Katie's Daylight Donuts, Ranch Supply, Hathcote Heating and Air, Fisher Bait and Tackle, Napa Auto Parts, West Fit, Know What I Can, Ella Carter Realty, and Sonic America's Drive-In, as well as, I don't think I'm missing anybody, but... So let's get this started. Let's start with Paul. Paul, can you give us we're talking about the Savoy. So where do we start? This is our first time. Where do we start? We just start giving information and just start with stories from there?
Where do you start? I guess
Well, where is the Savoy?
it's Delaware Street, Delaware and Pine, and faces south. Doug, I guess, used to refer to it. In fact, the first time I saw Doug's TV station, he was broadcasting off from the balcony of the Savoy.
Oh, really?
And it was Pioneer Day downtown. They had Ferris wheels and
What?
downtown was closed off.
What year was this?
1994 or 5.
Wow. That was before I was born.
So I took my kids to Pioneer Day, but he was broadcasting from the top of the Savoy. And I worked in Tulsa when I first moved here in 94. For the first 3 years, drove back and forth. So basically, if I leave at 5 o'clock on any given day in Tulsa and come in here, it's a ghost town by the time I get to town. Except for Pioneer Day.
So Pioneer Day, here recently, it's been on Cherokee Street, but it was big enough that it spilled over to Delaware and Pine?
Oh, yeah. It was Delaware and Maple Street. And to be honest with you, I don't really remember if they closed off Cherokee, but this was one of the main avenues with rides right out here in Maple Street.
Awesome.
And
That's good to know.
Yeah, there was people here all hours, not just business hours, but evenings and stuff. There were quite a few people here still. So, but Doug filmed off the top, and he used to call it the Grand Old Dame of Nolwenna.
The Grand Old Dame?
Yep.
That's
Like
so
the-
cool.
Or
the
the
lady.
Grand Lady.
The Grand Lady.
Yep. And so now the lady has osteoporosis and
Oh.
Has kind of a headache.
hair's
Well,
falling
she's over 100.
Yep.
She's looking a little rough these
What
days.
year do you remember?
Well,
when she was
it
built?
finally opened in 1909, but originally it burnt to the ground 2 days before it was supposed to open.
Do you have a picture?
Yes, I do. Do you?
Well, Paul sent me some digital pictures over Messenger, and I couldn't figure out how to get Messenger pictures to email them to me and put them into the program and everything. In the future, we'll have a little bit higher production value, I think. But I'm glad you printed those out. I'm glad you thought ahead. I've already had issues getting some things together. But 1909, there's a house, a yellow house down by catty-cornered from the Methodist Church. And it was built in 1909. A lot of hopping things were going on in 1909.
Yep.
What year is your building, Shelby?
I believe around 1908 or
Really?
before, because we have vault inspection papers that are still intact on the vault, and it rates back from 08, 09, 10, 12, and then it skips to like 23 and then 32. So but they're still, yeah, which could be, some bankers, maybe they didn't want to get their vault inspected those years. Those are the ones that are on the door.
That needs to be another podcast, and it very well could have been the first one, is this building, and then of course Paul, your building,
1909.
Yeah.
No, 09. No, 9's the year to do things.
Yeah.
Man, for sure. Well, you got that picture real quick?
I do. I've got 2 photographs of the hotel the day after it burned. You want me to hold them up the camera?
Yeah.
This is so sad.
So,
Yeah, look at all that damage. This is
Oh
just
my
straight
God.
carnage.
so they just like tear it down, or do they build back with what was there?
I understand they saved the east structure.
That is crazy.
I can kind of see that where that arch is,
Right.
maybe.
So how did the mortar just get hot and just crumble, and so all the bricks? I would assume that would like mess with the integrity of the rest of the bricks, right?
Well, back then, and our building included, the walls are so thick. They're 20-inch thick walls on the downstairs. The reason being is because the brick was soft.
Yeah.
We manufactured our own brick right on Brick Plant Road.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that's why they called it Brick Plant Road, but there's various
So whenever you said they
opinions
were
there.
soft, they hadn't cured yet, and they
Well,
went and
it
built
was
them, or?
it was from domestic clay, and the pavers that they used in town were fired 3 times to get them extra durable, the hardness. The bricks on the front of the Kentucky building were fired twice just for the facade. That gives it the dark color, and they would put different materials in there to burn the color into the bricks.
And these are the ones with the stamp with the NOWATA and the star.
Right,
And everything.
but generally the building bricks were soft. So because of that, you have to use a mortar that's equal to or a little bit softer. What happens if you use a real hard mortar, like if you went down to relay bricks today and used regular mortar mix?
I didn't know we were going to get a masonry lesson.
Listen.
This is super fascinating to
Listen,
me.
yeah,
This is-
I want to know, because we've had some issues. Like, we cleaned out our basement here. We had the whole boiler and everything down. It's not there anymore because we cleaned it all out. But a lot of it, like, you could tell where they had bricked over, where they would like dump the coal in to shovel the
Oh, right.
coal in to keep the heat going. I mean, so I'm interested.
Okay, so finish it, because this is...
Well,
I
what
didn't know
happens
this.
is that if you use hard mortar and the bricks are soft, there's movement. And if the mortar doesn't give and the bricks do, then it spalls the face of the bricks. And you've seen where faces of brick.
Oh, right.
So if you repoint the brick on the outside of a building, you have to use what they used back when they built the thing, which is just sand and limestone. So because it's so soft, they made the walls extra thick to compensate so that they could have the load bearing from the walls.
So do they cure and get stronger over time, or
No,
it is what it is?
you can see towards the top, especially like on Kentucky building, most of the older buildings,
Which
if
one
they
is the
haven't
Kentucky
been.
building?
That's Paul's
That's-
building.
Oh, that's your building. Okay. Which is just right over there.
Yeah, and actually, the weather, all the elements will start wearing the mortar.
Like whenever there's like a day like today, it's misting and freezing rain, and so does that like over time and just freezing and expanding?
Well,
just
sure,
starts
it's
wearing out your
110
mortar
years takes its toll on there.
Yeah.
They have to be repointed. There's a few areas where they've used some newer mortar and it has spalled some of the faces of the brick, generally on the side. You get by with a harder mortar in the front because the bricks were hardened. The pavers were hardened 3 times that they built out here. So when they laid the street, in Maple Street, there's 3 layers of pavers because Maple Street had the streetcar
Right.
that came up and down. So they needed the extra.
which that needs to be a whole nother podcast.
And that's why the street has such a huge
Kind of a
crown.
dome, yeah.
And
That's
if
why it
you're
floods
parked on,
That's
your
why it
building?
floods my building.
that's right.
Because
Send
it's
it to
flooding my
Shelby's.
building all the freaking time.
Send it down to Shelby.
Great.
So. But if you get a bad ice storm and you're parked on this side of the street, it's really hard to back up. So that's because there's 3 layers of brick. I was told that in California they're buying pavers, like what's buried underneath here, at a cost that if you could get permission, because Maple Street is still alternate 169, and then of course Cherokee is 60. But if you could take up all the pavers in these areas and dig them all up and load them on trucks, take them out to California and sell them, you would have enough money to repave the entire area of Nowata and still have enough to retire on for the rest of your life.
Do our officials know about that?
I don't know.
It would be
If
like
they watch this, I guess they will.
Yeah, hey, guys, tune in.
learning all kinds of different things.
So-
well, I would expect, anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Well, okay, so I am friends with a volunteer fireman, and he actually just started reading our water meters here at Sweet Peas. So I kind of was telling him about what we were doing today, and his name's Manny, and he said, "Well, honestly, if a fire breaks out there, we are instructed to just surround it, and because it's a condemned building, to let it burn." And that made me cry. It made me so sad. And
It's got. I graduated in 2001, and about that time it was owned by a family here in town, and we were having our proms. We're having our proms. Did you ever have your prom at it?
Marcus, I graduated in 2014. But whenever I was
Scope of reference.
but whenever I was young, I remember being probably, because you were the same age as Amy Jones, right?
Right.
So-
She was a year younger than me.
Okay, so I remember going and watching her at Grand March, and at the time back then you could go in after they did Grand March and like kind of mingle and get pictures with the kids and stuff. So I was itty bitty, I was born in 96, so 5 years old maybe. And the first and only memory that I have is walking in and seeing the beautiful mosaic tile.
Oh, right.
Like just being enthralled. Like why don't people know about this? Why are only special occasions allowed here? Like I feel like this is a gem that we need to treasure. At such a young age, I knew that.
I remember being distracted at prom whenever you're kind of like, oh, pretty girls in dresses, teenage kid. And all I could think of was, how could I sneak up those stairs and go explore this? Totally fine with that.
I don't
Totally
remember-
fine with just skipping the prom and just going upstairs and walking through.
I don't really remember the staircase very well, and I kind of vaguely remember it being like a really dark colored wood. But
Paul's got a picture of.
oh yeah, but it's so
Is
sad.
this-
That's
is this
what
a
it looks
fairly
like.
Recent picture, Paul?
This is pretty current.
I think that's from 2009.
Let's see it. Aw.
This is so sad. Oh, I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna barf.
Can you sand that out? And
Can we buff
redo it?
that?
Or is that pretty much gone?
A lot of the white is, mold and fungi.
Oh God.
Dang it. I know.
so-
It's so.
I think I'm having a heart
Shelby's
attack.
having.
It would have to be
She's having acid reflux right now.
I'm gonna die.
would have to be completely dismantled, and I mean, if you can save some of the wood, but the staircase, from what I understand, is even collapsed since then, and
Oh, really?
I'm not sure if you can even get up to some of the upper floors from this direction. Anyway, I used to climb it. There was a guy in 1999 that moved here from California. He was a good friend of Chuck Price, and he worked with Chuck in the film industry for more or less his whole life. He's from Wisconsin. Eric Lidberg, and he
Oh,
was.
is this the guy you were talking about?
Yeah,
earlier?
he was a character for sure, and really good guy. He got lung cancer, and in California, it's so expensive, cost of living out there if you're not working. So Chuck made available one of the apartments in the Savoy for him to live free of charge, and he lived right at about a year, I guess. Died in 2000. He used to take his meals up to him in the morning and then in the evening as he got kind of progressively worse, but
Where at was he staying?
in the Savoy.
Well, I mean, like on
Second,
the second
he was on
floor.
the second floor. And Chuck's mom and dad had a real nice apartment on the northwest corner.
So it was still habitable about 2000.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I
And-
guess I graduated in 01. Did I go to my senior prom? Yeah, I did.
when the roof began to leak, it's a little bit tougher on that roof as opposed to, see, like ours is not really a flat roof. It drops almost 5 feet from front to back over 100 feet. But the Savoy being completely flat, it just raises havoc.
Snow load.
Well, the snow loads, and we had some
Water.
huge snows in 2010, 2011.
So when did the roof collapse?
I don't know what year exactly.
We're assuming a lot. That's something I keep forgetting about. That's what I need to do is like remember. For somebody that might be interested in this that doesn't know anything about it, I've assumed a lot of things by saying most people out there might not know that the roof has actually collapsed in fairly recently, within the last couple of years. There was an effort to save it, right?
Yeah.
And I know Doug Buchner was part of that.
It collapsed into the point that, see, on the lower level where they used to have the proms and the ballroom, that was a single story because it's kind of a U shape, and then the ballroom was in the center, so that roof was on the first level roof. When that roof collapsed in, it took the ballroom right to the basement.
Oh.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Let's watch-
I was
let's
so
watch-
sad.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And that was the mosaic tile.
And that's what I remembered.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Why?
So that floor, it'd be a little hard to piece together. That was one of the biggest. Those were 1-inch circles.
Yeah.
Pretty much like
They
what's
were
in the courthouse.
kind of like the hexagon style, right? They
Yeah.
were, yeah. They were, I mean, they
Like
were,
you'll see at banks and
yeah.
stuff.
Well, and I'm convinced that's what's underneath this wood
Yeah,
flooring
it
in
was
here.
in here.
Let's tear it
Yeah,
up.
I want to, but my dad would have a cow. He would have a
You
cow.
can see it on the side entrance at the 45-degree angle where you're at No Water Can.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen the tile
Yeah.
right there?
Yeah.
And then also, this used to be in No Water Star next door. And before the carpeting was put in the entryway there, it was the same type of tile. So it was all over the city.
Who covered it? I want to give him a talking
Styles
to.
change. Styles
Oh,
change.
yeah.
Well, it's kind of like
In the 50s, it was the thing to do.
I know, but
Just get rid of
God.
all this old stuff, and put in some new stuff. And even in the 60s, that mentality carried over because if you look at some of the television shows, the Addams Family and the Munsters, and they were filmed on a set where they had this old Victorian architecture and stuff, and it was sort of made fun of because
like mocked that it was.
yeah, it was mockery
old.
that look where Gomez Addams lives in this creepy old house.
was it roughly the 70s whenever they started putting like tin over the top of all the brick facades and everything?
That was really
The 60s.
urban renewal, early 60s.
Let's make it look new and
There was metal over the front of the Kentucky building, and urban renewal came in and put
Well,
aluminum.
they put this really ugly, really long kind of white brick. I don't even know what that's called on our facade here at Sweet Peas, and then they rocked our entryway, and there a piece of that rock has chipped up in the corner, and you can see where the mosaic tile is underneath it. And I'm like, that gives me hope, and I really want to rip this floor up.
Well, okay, so we're talking about the Savoy, obviously here in Nowata County, or Nowata, the city of Nowata, and it's at Delaware and Pine. We've talked about a little bit of like what it's doing right now. The roof is kind of caved in. We know that there was a situation where somebody had fallen off, and I think that's kind of where it's at right now. Is that it's under some kind of
litigation, from what I
Yeah.
understand. I have kind of looked into the records, and it's not settled as far as I know.
It was a death, and I think the amount was about $80,000. Which
guy
is
fell
not.
off of the west side. Working on
Yeah.
the roof, is that what it was?
Yeah.
From what I understand, there was he was up there alone painting, and which I don't really know why you need to paint a roof, but I mean, whatever. And there was an electrical worker that was working down the alleyway between the Kentucky building and maybe the Nowata Can building, or maybe it was over. I'm not real sure, but I think an electrical worker saw him fall.
On the west side of it.
Kind of on Pine Street, maybe over there by the dentist office. Somebody saw him fall, and he wasn't sure if he fell or if he jumped, but he was by himself.
Right.
And by the time help came, I think it was too late.
Yeah. Well, and just in case there's any legal stuff, we're just a couple of people that are interested in this, regurgitating information that maybe we've heard. These are not facts to be taken to the bank, but if somebody has some more information to add to it, then maybe we'll make a second Savoy podcast here in
Corrections Corner.
episode 20 or something. And we'll come back and revisit.
Yeah.
There's always new things to learn about it and everything. So that's kind of where it's at. A lot of people have started talking about it, and I said, well, I know just enough to be dangerous, and they're like, man, we sure should get that back. And it's like, man, how much money would it take to rebuild it and put the new floor down in it and everything? It would just be astronomical. You might as well just rebuild the whole thing, really. Or are those, Paul, I'll ask you, is the structural, just the facade, the prettiness of it, could it potentially be rebuilt?
Well, how those buildings were built were, the outside, the skeletal frame was
not necessarily structural.
Yeah, it was structural.
Oh, it was.
So the outside walls, inside walls, the way that it was built, and then basically you just hang the floor and ceilings based on the inside, the exterior structure of the whole thing. So
was it you telling me that there was a building built inside of that building, essentially?
No.
Or maybe that was Doug. Maybe they're okay. I may be just totally confused.
Well, they have redone the floor and the roof over the ballroom, and there's been a new floor put in. I did see that. Jay Mitchell, current owner, was there one day, and he had the workers there. I went over and talked to him, and I did get to see the ballroom.
How recently was this?
Floor. It's been several years ago.
Oh, okay.
It was before the roofer incident. I think he was painting Silver Seal
Okay.
on top of that. It's kind of a reflective, tarry. Yeah.
So
and,
That's just sad.
Yeah.
it was built in 1909, burnt down the day it was going to open.
Yeah. 2 days before it opened.
2 days before it opened, and it was going to be, and it got rebuilt. Do we know whenever it actually officially opened?
11, right?
Oh, just 2 years later? Jeez Louise.
I guess it went pretty fast. They didn't have to rebuild the basement.
Oh, okay, so they had their...
And they did have the east side and stuff. And, I suppose you run into things on any project that second time around is a little quicker for you.
We've done this before.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I know where this goes.
Where's this brick go?
Yeah.
I remember that brick. Well,
put
it was
that brick there.
actually it was designed by an architect in in Coffeyville, Kansas. Claire Henderson was an architect. I found his original architectural rendering.
Wow.
That's so cool. You can tell it's changed.
So that doesn't have the what do you call that, like the portico or...
Yeah, the arched window. Yeah, the downstairs, the entrances were different, and then
Yeah.
the overhang, the front porch is not on there as well. So, but the flag's there.
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
So
kept the
it's
flag.
essentially a 4-story building with a basement in it.
Yep. And that was civil defense shelter, tornado shelter and stuff. When we first moved here, it was still open. So if you had
Wow.
bad storms
wow.
come in and stuff, then you could always take
So it
refuge in the basement down there.
It was rated to, not the top part, but the basement was...
Right. Henderson Architecture also did the municipal building in Coffeyville, Kansas. That's also his architectural,
It looks
You can
the
see
same.
the style. Yeah, you can definitely see the style.
but a different style, and it was probably based on a theater that was in Kansas City, is the Midland Theater in Coffeyville. People probably
That's so
been
pretty.
up to Coffeyville
It kind of
and
looks
seen
southwest kind of.
Yep.
Yeah.
that. Exactly.
Whenever you messaged those to me, I came over and I showed Shelby, and she was losing it. She's like, "No way! Is that the front of the Jubilee?"
Yeah, I was so mad.
Because I thought
was
I thought
like,
the same
who
thing.
did this?
If they put that tin over that
I was gonna be
Midland,
so mad.
that facade was-
Yeah.
Because the top part, or the porch, not the porch, but the awning or whatever, looks very similar to the Jubilee.
The Jubilee building has windows over the top of the
And it's
awning.
the tin's covering it
Yeah.
up.
The problem with the tin is that the front of the building around the windows and towards the top cap, because of the soft mortar, eventually began to leak over the front of the building. Dick Pugh, Richard, he was on our board over there. And I think he was actually the one that put contracted the metal put on the front of the building of the Jubilee. and I think there was actually a Dollar General store in there. There was an auction in there.
I can
course.
see that.
Ugh.
There was a No Water Star there, of course, and
That's almost disrespectful. No hate
Lot of-
towards Dollar General, but man,
That's
it's
a historical
full
building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, they had Chubb's Candy Store over here between the bank and Benjamin's years ago, and Phil Ogden, not to date you, Phil.
Dating.
Yeah, I'm not dating anyway. So. Phil said they used to hang around at the when he was a kid at Chubb's Candy Store, and they'd get a call over there from the No Water Star because all the paper boys were over there, and they say papers are ready, and they'd throw the bundles out the side. And he said, there was a huge hornet's wasp nest over the top of the little awning over here in the alley, and had to fight the hornets to get your papers and go deliver. That was the Daily Star then, so.
Wow.
The Daily
Well, back in those days, Nowata had enough commerce. They had enough things going on. Well, when the Savoy was built, the whole reason it was built because Nowata was booming, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
We had 3 newspapers. Is that right?
I don't know.
yeah, there had been 3 different newspapers in town back then. Actually, I've got here. Nowata's population in 1900 was 498 people. So when the oil boom hit, 1904, 1905, it's about the same time that they struck radium in the water.
There's our tie-in.
Yep. And then the whole area decided to explode, and they had dignitaries coming in. There were probably as many oil contracts signed in the lobby of the Savoy Hotel as anywhere else, I suppose, in the several county area. The Nowata field is the oldest
Shallow.
field in Oka.
Is it the shallow?
It's a shallow field, but it's also the oldest field in Oklahoma. They hit radium at about 1,500 feet, radium water. In the 1950s, actually, there was a government study done to look for mining uranium because of the radium that was in the water that they found. I thought maybe that might have been a source. And they did find uranium, but it was in small enough quantities that it wasn't worth messing with. But they also hit it down in Claremore, and Claremore was the only other radium bath. See, in Nowata, I think the radium company actually started about 1904 when they started drilling.
So was the radium baths an original part of the Savoy? Do you know, Shelby? Or?
No, they added it to the Savoy, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
1916.
So it was kind of like a spa, luxury, rich people thing.
Yep.
You know, only these oil men and women can come in and take these baths that were supposed to cure, arthritis and, psoriasis, anything that ails you. Radium was supposed to cure it. I'm actually reading a book right now called The Radium Girls by Kate Moore, and back then they used radium for dial painters, and back then
Did it glow? Was that
yes,
the
it was
glow?
luminous paint, and that's why radium was the number one ingredient. Well, they didn't know that it could kill you,
Right.
and so a lot of these women had like radium poisoning and stuff, and they were dying. Like their jaws would deteriorate and fall out of their mouths, and just their bones, like they'd be walking and their spine would collapse. And yeah, can just imagine that. I've got pictures in this book. It's crazy, but I don't have the book with me. But if you are interested in that kind of dark history, like I am, go ahead and get Kate Moore's book and look up the Radium Girls. It is extremely interesting. So I was curious to see if, because back then they thought that radium cured everything. So
Just because you got like a buzz off it? Like,
it kind of just made you kind of tingly, or they said it would make your cheeks rosy, and it'd make you pretty,
Make you glow.
and make you glow. Like literally, when they excavated a lot of these graves for these women that had this radium poisoning, they were glowing. The casket was glowing.
Wow.
So
You have a Geiger counter?
I've got some of those civil defense. They measure roentgens, I guess, if in case there's a nuclear exchange again.
We should do that someday. Just go by and just see if it'll pick up any radio.
I've got a whole box of those that are brand new, and I often wondered if
I'm curious if the Savoy is radioactive, if that's what you're saying.
Well, I
they
mean,
haven't needed
it would be good to know for our citizens who walk down that. I have a walking path that I'm putting in, and if they need to be on the other side of the street,
it's always lit up at night, but there's no street light there.
Weird. That's crazy. Why is it glow in the dark? They have this really crazy glow in the dark paint.
In the 1920s, they made they call it depression wear now, although the depression wasn't really called it.
Plates.
Yeah, they had plates that if you hold them under a black light there, they glow, and there's radium. And they say
green or blue.
Yeah, green. I think blue too, as far as that goes. Suzanne's got a pretty good book on that stuff, and I think there's some photographs of them underneath black light and stuff. They said the levels on those were so low that you'd have to basically wear a coffee saucer around your neck for 20 years.
For it to bother you.
Well, you can sometimes run into those in like antique shops and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
People are like, oh, it's the blue glass. Oh, that's the bad
That's
glass.
the radium.
Yeah. Well, No Water Radium Sanitarium Company.
Sanitarium.
See, that's scary.
See, the sanitariums, a lot of people think it's like...
For insane asylum.
Yeah, the lack of better terms than outhouse. That's politically correct, I'm sure. So it was No Wata Radium Wata.
Oh, clever.
Yep. So it was the No Water Radium Sanitarium Company, and that started about 1904. And then, of course, the Savoy incorporated them in 1916 because in Claremore, they also struck and they built just the radium bathhouse, which was just basically for that. It was 50 cents for an allotted amount of time, which is about almost $15 today. So
wow.
It was affordable, but...
I'm trying to get a picture in my head. So this... was a kitschy thing, and as things go, like the pet rock or whatever. But were they just bathtubs full of glowing radium water? Is that?
That was just
strip down and jump in.
Yeah,
just the bathhouse, and a lot of them were, some of the upper class places would have the copper tubs. I'm sure.
Do we have any idea what the radium bathhouse looked like in Nowata? Do we have any?
I've never seen a picture. It would have been in the basement, from what I understand.
Yeah.
So.
I've been so curious because you walk by and you just see that
the hand, and it's go down there if you want that good glow in the dark bath.
Down here.
Yeah, let's go down there. Well, if you're a citizen out there and you actually have photos of this, we would love to see it.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's one of the radium water, just probably shortly after it was painted on the wall there.
Yeah.
Yes, very fresh. You can see it over in the bottom.
How cool would that be if that building was functioning like it is, except for the radio?
For the radio. But that is so unique.
There's the Savoy.
Yeah.
Before radium. Got the flag in the center.
And so the radium basically, you were saying, Shelby, deteriorates the bone density?
Yeah, so the science of radium, it basically acts like calcium. Your bones absorb it, but instead of making your bones stronger, it deteriorates and makes your bones look almost like Swiss cheese. It just drills holes in your bones. And so, they would be walking... a lot of those girls that worked in the radium corporations and the radium dial... they were dial painters, so they were lip painters, and how they painted those little bitty tiny watch faces they would lip dip paint.
Yeah, and that's
to
why
make
they're having
that
such a big deal
with their jaws.
Were you telling me that, or did I learn that something else?
I don't know.
Where they
I
were
was
licking
kind of yes
to make the brush pointier.
Pointier.
So maybe I did. Maybe you were the one.
Yes.
Who told me that.
So that's why a lot of them had jaw issues. Some of them had horrible foot and hip pain, knee pain, back pain. I mean, and then whenever they were finally dying, they would have huge abscesses, just open sores and cancers and things like that. And it's
this is a gross
this is really gross. I don't know why I'm getting so morbid about it, but it's so interesting.
It's interesting though. It's totally interesting.
Yeah, and basically whenever they were trying to prove that these girls were dying of radium poisoning, when they were digging these bodies back up, the soil around them was glowing, the casket was glowing. the bones themselves were glowing. It is just insane.
I imagine that was a nightmare for like all the
Oh yeah, and
lawsuits
this was
stuff.
like 1928 is whenever they really started going to court and stuff about it. So that was about the time that
So
the
what is
corporations.
the math on it, like 19 years later?
Yeah,
After it
about.
opened? Yeah.
Don't ask me
Wow.
math.
And it was
Well-
billed as prepared from nature's elements.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says, of Mother Earth, the beginning and the ending of all things, the cause as well as the cure of all disease. Nature is the best doctor, and her product the best medicine. We encircle the world with radium water. And this was still in Indian Territory, so it would be about 1904, 1905. Little advertisement they had back then.
That is some
That is some beautiful advertising.
legit old school.
Yeah, I
graphic
love
design.
that.
That's awesome.
And then this claim was radium cures, nature's remedy. Baths are good medicine. Baths bring beauty.
They burn your skin and bones.
Visit the well that makes you well. Health is here for you, and so on. So try a gallon for 50 cents a gallon, which
Yeah.
would be $15 by today, $13.95 or something like that.
For a gallon.
FOB Nowata, Indian Territory. Ask for radium splits at all fountains.
That reminds me where I was going to go a while ago, and I got so distracted with like the things that happen with the radium. But how many times have we heard in a lot of different ways that natural, it's organic, it's from
Oh, yeah.
Earth,
And then it kills
it's,
you.
and it's good. Well, my wife is doing these floats. I don't know if you guys have heard about these floats, but basically, there's a place in Tulsa, and it's got these like pod things that you get in, and it looks space age. I haven't been to it.
I
Megan
have
says
seen
I really
that.
need to go. But it's basically full of salt water, which is salt. Surely it's the salt of the earth. You know, it should be perfectly fine.
Or like Epsom salt.
But I don't think there's anything else in it. I think it's just water and salt. But you go in there, and it's an isolation chamber. So this is kind of a modern day version of the radium baths. But it's so what is the word for something that's not actively going to hurt you, but it's like innate or something.
Inert.
But yeah, inert. Yeah. So, but hopefully we don't find out something in 100 years from now, like, oh, those baths that they did.
If your jaw
make
starts
your jaw
rotting
fall
out,
off and
you
your
know.
coffin will glow.
Well, it's one thing to sit in that stuff, and I guess one of the plus sides would be you probably didn't have to worry about catching anything from somebody that sat in it before you.
I guess
It's
that's true.
killed
It'd probably
it
kill it all.
killed everything.
Yeah.
But they were drinking this stuff. It relieves
Yeah.
the overindulgence in drink, purifies the stomach, gives appetite, and it assists nature.
Yes, yeah. It basically they were using it as like a X-Lax.
I was gonna say it.
Yeah, like
Assisting nature.
yes,
means
it
keeps you
was-
regular.
Basically, it keeps you regular.
Better than fiber.
It's because your body's trying to get it out of you.
Your body's rejecting it.
Your body's rejecting it the only way it knows how.
Yep. Well, in Claremore, they put up their own bathhouse that was just for the radium baths, and it was pretty close to downtown. They actually ran a well that was north and east of Claremore a little bit, and they piped it right straight into the baths right out of the well.
So that's super
This-
radium.
This
Yeah.
picture looks to me.
Looks like
It looks
like a
out
train
of
station.
a horror movie.
Yeah.
It looks like it's out of a horror movie.
But you could see, I don't know if you could see it or not, but there's a woman in a really long old style dress right front and center. Shirt and skirt, right? There. And that's just the, man, it's just so.
And she's a ghost? Is that what
Yeah,
you're
that's
gonna tell
she's, it's haunted. It's haunted. That's what it is.
us? What is this, Paul?
Same.
Oh, it's the same thing.
Oh, so they boxed it
Colorized.
in.
Oh, okay.
Did they add windows?
Is
Because
that
that,
in Technicolor?
it's in Technicolor.
I think it says my phone.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
cool.
Super
Goes a little bit
scary.
later.
So when did they shut that place down? Figure out.
I
when that
didn't
was?
find any. I didn't find any dates as far as when they closed the place down. I think they did actually move some to the Will Rogers Hotel, but like I say, by the time the investigation came into it around 1928, then
Yeah.
that pretty well started to put a stop. And I'm thinking that years past I read, actually by a fluke, I bought an old book printed in 1912. First printing of the Titanic.
Wow.
And inside the book, somebody had owned newspaper clippings. And this woman who had actually lost her husband on the Titanic wrote a letter that they used for advertising to one of the radium places. Like, it was good stuff, you know. I mean, she survived the Titanic, so how bad could radium water be?
Oh.
Right? So,
Yeah.
so
What else?
strange things you find in
Wow.
unlikely places, you know.
Well, my grandmother, she was Mary Kay Smith, if you know her. You know
I know
her.
Mary, yeah.
She's great. My little granny. Granny, I asked her, I said, do you remember anything about the Savoy? Did you ever go in, really? And she's like, nah, I didn't really go in there. Wasn't my thing. I was, you know,
This
she's
is the
super.
other grandma.
This is my mom's mom. So
Okay.
my other grandma, I have a grandma that did live in the Savoy. Granny, she got married in 1950, and she was born, I think, in like 32 or 33. And she did not really remember anything about the radium baths still in operation. So apparently they had shut that down somewhere in there.
Well, you said, like, what is it, 28?
28 is when
Is when
the
we really
Radium
started figuring out
Corporation, went
Time
to
shut
trial.
that down. I wonder what the half-life is on radium.
Oh, they tell you in that book it's like forever.
Ooh, so
it's
it
like
could still be
forever.
going. Ah.
Yeah. I want to say that I was like,
Maybe I need to reroute the walking trail over to across the street.
how does can we detect radium? Do we have any?
Oh, I imagine, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
If it's radioactive, it in a Geiger counter get just about anything that's radioactive.
Yeah, we might want to check that.
Well, that's super fascinating. So, is there anything else on the radium baths that you can think of that is of interest, or can we start talking about some other things in the Savoy? Like, what was?
It was
no.
built for $50,000.
That's crazy.
Twice, probably.
Twice.
I might be able.
And-
If you guys co-sign for me, I might be able to
50,000
get a
by
loan for that.
Oh,
if
I don't
got
have
two
any
people.
good merit. Nobody would loan me any money.
50,000 by today's inflation would run $1.31 million. So
It's a shame that we let something like that go.
the rooms are relatively plain, but when that was built, living was relatively plain.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So it
Well,
had to have, upgraded electrical added over the years, and of course plumbing and
Which was probably
drains.
lead.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure it was. We took lead pipe out across the streets.
Yeah. Well, I'm, and I don't know this for sure, but they didn't have bathrooms in each room, correct? They were like community bathrooms, right?
I think, as I remember, see, they incorporated a hospital in the 1940s up there.
Oh, that's what I was going to
And-
ask you about, Shelby.
Yeah.
So I know that there were added sinks, because there's a sink that's in the shop in the very back that originally came out of the Savoy. But I don't believe it was original to the building, because the style was about 1940s, late 30s, 1940s, something like
Would they
that.
have
Maybe.
used like wash bins and stuff? And, like,
Probably
carry water?
so. Probably the
Not
pitcher
having
and
a full
Oh,
plumbing
yeah.
level.
I didn't
Picture
even
and
think
sink
about
and-
that. Yeah.
It's probably been retrofitted. I mean, think about the technology changing at that time. It's probably been retrofitted like 5 or 6 times for plumbing and electricity and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, and they added an elevator too, right? They had an elevator.
Oh, did it really?
Yeah, I think it did. I've heard people say that it has an elevator. I don't know if that's fact.
it was
Probably
on the
like one of
north
those like KG ones.
on the north side. You may be right on that now that I think of it. And I know that they did add a stairway that goes to the basement in the front. Chuck and Diane Price had a sandwich shop in there. Boy, it was good. Sandwiches, soups.
Cool.
It was just a great shop, and they added a stairway into the basement, which I think they had intended on putting more antiques and one thing or another down in the basement. It didn't work out. Not because of the building itself, but because of family interest and people going different directions. I mean, life happens, and his kids were getting older at the time, and one thing or another anyway. But it was a great sandwich shop. That was in the area that has the arched window and stuff, and used to go in there and sit. And
Well, your aunt would have been your aunt. Cooper's grandma, Vicky.
Vicky.
Okay, so Vicky Ursa, at one time when she was cutting hair and stuff,
Oh, right. Yeah,
she
yeah,
had
yeah.
a salon on.
I remember that now.
Yeah, because I went in. That was the other time that I went into the Savoy. It was in the. It was on the southwest corner, and it was gorgeous. I remember there was like really beautiful green marble in there, and like it seemed like she had like salon chairs that were in like these giant like
I remember
wooden.
them. They were chrome and red leather.
Yeah.
They were the old school, cool looking ones. Yeah.
Super cool. I got my first pedicure in there. It was the coolest thing ever to like a 7-year-old, like coolest thing. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is such a beautiful salon, like why don't we have more of this stuff? So
The things that we appreciate after the fact.
Yeah.
To appreciate them in the moment for a 7-year-old, that's
Well-
pretty in tune with. Today you're still super interested in that kind of
Same,
stuff. And
yeah.
it just, but the thing is, some people are not. They think
They don't
through
care.
the lens of
Yeah.
how is this going to be able to be profitable. You got to do that. You got to survive. Like Paul was saying, it's life happens, and it's like, well, do I send my kid to college or do I try to fix up this building that
right.
probably should just be left alone, to be honest. But
Right.
so we talked about right up to about 1924-ish, 28, something like that is whenever like the radium baths, people started figuring out, oh, this is bad, so they probably condemned that or closed it or got rid of it. And then he said there was a hospital that came in.
Yeah.
hospital there in the 1940s. I've heard maybe as early as 1939, 38, something like that. I had a good friend of mine who's passed away now, Wayne Woods. When he was 16, during the war years, he had his appendix out in the Savoy, had it removed. So they did do some surgeries. A lot of people were born there, I suppose.
That is crazy.
Yep. And they had a hard time getting penicillin because of during the war. And Wayne was in a coma for 2 weeks, I guess, in the Savoy with appendicitis, and almost didn't make it. He'd had diphtheria at 1.5 years, and he beat
my
that.
God.
Yeah. It was rough. That would have been 1927 and a half, early 28 when he had diphtheria. He had an older brother who was 3 at the time that had diphtheria as well, and he didn't make it.
Yeah, guys, if you don't know, diphtheria causes like tumors in your neck and throat. Like it can kill you so fast.
He said his
You
grandmother
suffocate.
put him, they sent him home because the doctors couldn't do anything. He said, you're just kind of on your own. So they put him in a warm tub, and his grandmother poured whiskey over the top of his chest, and which he thinks may have led to later problems he had with. She
He's
did
like, I
eventually
just
get
love
back,
alcohol.
So, yeah. So, but
I've been
he
absorbing this since I was.
yeah, he
I was
lived
one.
through that, and he lived through appendicitis at 16, 2 weeks in a coma, and he became a crew chief, McDonnell Douglas, in Tulsa in the 1950s, just after the war. And there's a photograph of him at the Tulsa Air and Space Museum on display down there.
That's so cool.
Wayne Woods, yeah, it was pretty neat to run into him. Oklahoma, actually, Nowata's population was the highest in the 1920s. It's never been that populated again. It's like
So when the
So-
coasts were kind of going through the Depression, it hadn't really hit Oklahoma as much yet at that point?
not that,
Or
of course,
people were moving to
in the 20s. If you were in oil,
roaring.
Yeah,
I guess
you were-
the Depression was after the 20s, right?
Late 20s, yeah.
see that I know that there were stories too that Frank Phillips used to come to Nowata during the 1930s, and he would see all the kids at school. And everybody took home a silver dollar in the 1930s. That was a pretty big
Oh, wow.
Oh my God, yeah, that probably fed families for.
deal. It's
Yeah.
$24 by today's money that
Wow.
they weren't going to see.
No. And
so-
I mean, Dust Bowl was coming through at that time too. It was just, it was a rough.
Nowata got put together in a big hurry. 1904 hit. They hit oil. 1905, and by statehood, it was already 2,400 people, which just 1904 was 498. So,
So-
more than quadrupled in size. And the courthouse was at the First National Bank, And they had sent one of Nowada's prominent figures, who I haven't been able to figure out who that is. It just says a prominent figure. And they sent him to Washington and came back with Indian courts, that they set up federal Indian courts. And so at the same time, the First National Bank had began, and they were still in the same location. It was a different building, and that also burned to the ground. But they had the federal court, and then it also housed the bank and several other businesses that were in there. That burned down, and they built our courthouse in 1912 for $68,000. It came in like $3,000 or $4,000 under budget, and it came in faster. And
that does not happen.
No.
That was $1.8 million. But to be honest with you, I don't think
in modern day money.
Yeah, I don't think you could build that for 1.8.
No.
Not with the
Not with all that marble and
the marble and the floors and.
So the Savoy was built originally as a hotel. Yep. And so recently I've been working with a lot of people like Representative Judge Strom and talking, I work with Nowada Area Chamber of Commerce a lot, and it's in my best interest as somebody that works with a TV station to get local economy going a little bit better and everything. So we talk about that better be just coffee, Paul. It's too early to start that, unless you brought extra. But
he's almost out.
But
no problem.
The thing is, for me, we had enough booming industry to justify a big hotel and then another one, because we have the Campbell down the road.
Which it was called the Nowada Lodge, right?
Yep.
And that's why I kept... Yeah, anyways, that's another thing.
Well, Savoy was 62 rooms starting out.
So what was bringing people in that was having them stay overnight? Because I'm super curious about that, because if you can justify a hotel in a town, that means you've got enough industry for people who want to stay overnight, and you've got enough things going on that people would be willing to stay. And that's something that Judge Strom and I and a bunch of other people have talked about, of what we could do for Nowada and the density of attractions, events going on a regular basis, stuff like the Jubilee or the Asylum and blah, 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 all that stuff. If you can have enough people in and out of town on a regular basis and justify a hotel, then that pretty much doubles, or if not triples, the income from people coming and visiting. So what was going on at that time that we could justify two, if not, were there other motels that we know of? Hotels.
There was one next to the Rex Theater.
Really?
They had a hotel
in an
there.
Empty lot.
Yep, and they had
north of it.
They had a drive-in portico over the front.
Really?
The Rex Theater, real quick, for those of you guys that are trying to keep up, the Rex Theater is...
it used to be Jackson Paint and Body is what it is right now.
Yeah.
But
Chris still owns it.
yes, he does.
So what were you saying?
There was a basement in the Savoy, or not the Savoy, in the Rex originally, and they had a barber that was there. You get your shoes shined. Then, of course, they had the balcony upstairs, and then the third floor was office and living quarters for the people who owned the theater. Next door to that, there was also a hotel.
How fun would that be to live above your own theater?
Well, you could ask Diane Price, because she lived up there.
Lived up there too?
Yeah.
Wow.
And Bill Brown had owned that theater for a long time. I guess when they decided to sell it to Nowada Print Company, they pulled in one of those big construction dumpsters off to the side, and they were just throwing stuff out of the upstairs balcony and film canisters, posters, who knows what.
Oh, that makes me so
But
sad.
that stuff wasn't
Such collectors
collectible
out
then,
there. Right, yeah.
And they took the seats out because the floor was sloped in there, and they took all the seats out until it got to be underneath the level where they poured concrete. And that floor, the concrete floor in there, has got to be really thick, because they just emptied the lower part of the slope floor with gravel and then poured probably 18 inches, maybe 2 feet of concrete over the top, because some of those print machines are so heavy. They've got to have a good support to them. But you can still see in the upstairs balcony, you can still see the angel painted on the ceiling with the ribbon.
Yeah, so
You've been
Chris's
inside there?
Chris's daughter is Michaela Yersa now.
Oh, okay.
And so your cousin Cooper is married to her, but whenever I was growing up, we would go over there, and we would kind of go walk around and kind of sneak
And we're
around
still
in
talking
there.
about the Rex, right?
Yes, it is. It's
That made
super
me-
neat. The
that's fun,
stage
too.
is still there. The angel cherubs, like you said, the painting, it's there. It looks rough. They have pictures. I could ask them for
And
photos.
the casing around the original stage is probably maybe 18 inches, and you can still see the porcelain sockets where they had lights all the way around the
It's gorgeous.
outside. Yeah, it was really nice. And it was built for vaudeville originally as much as it was built for film.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I know that the museum over here has just about every No Water Star paper filed away. And it would be interesting to go in and see what the advertisements were for who was performing at the Rex, because in an oil boom town, we were on a pretty good circuit from what I understand. And you might have had the Three Stooges in there at one time.
Oh,
What?
wow.
You could have had Jack
would be
Benny
cool.
was, all these older guys were in vaudeville back in those days. George Burns could have been here, and No Water, you never know. So
what specifically?
looking
I've
up.
heard of
vaudeville.
vaudeville.
Or
I've
if you're
heard
from
of it.
Jersey, vaudeville.
Vaudeville. Well, what is it specifically? Is it like a genre of plays?
It's, stand-up, slapstick. There was some drama. There was a lot of singing.
So it's kind of a variety
Yeah,
show. It's
exactly.
a live variety show. Okay.
Right. So there was quite a bit of entertainment there. Rodney Lay years ago told me an interesting story that his family was leaving from Missouri, and they were actually going, I think, if I'm not mistaken, to New Mexico. And so they stopped here and they spent their first night in No Water. There was a stable about where the John's Mission is right now.
Okay.
James Mission.
Yeah, James Mission. And there were still mud streets because it had rained, and they No Water was booming pretty well at that time. And so,
So what are we talking? 40s?
oh no,
Or are we
early oil days,
Oh,
you know.
okay. So
all still horse and buggy. So there were, like I say, there were still horse stables there on Cherokee, and so they stayed there close by.
I'm sorry, I didn't even.
And no one in No Water apparently played music or anything. Well, Rodney Lay's family has been in music. They had fiddles and who knows what else. So that night they came out and they played music, and the whole town came out. All 498 people packed in Cherokee Street anyway. And they had such a good time that the mayor actually confronted the family and talked them into staying here in No Water instead of going on. So they kind of settled in this area based on their music and their entertainment, because they were.
We've had conversations before, and I think, Shelby, we probably had it before. I've had it with a bunch of people, but that's what I really want to be able to be a part of, is to bringing entertainment back into No Water, because maybe that's what would keep people from going to Bartlesville or Owasso, Collinsville,
Sure.
Veneta, Coffeyville now, because of the Walmart and everything. But, our tendencies is to go everywhere else to spend their money because we don't feel like there's entertainment here. Well, that story you just told, it sounds like there was nobody doing any music.
And so they made it happen.
They like the mayor literally talked them into staying in the town.
Yeah,
so
they were
could be there
dancing in the mud in
entertainment.
the street and
Yeah,
had
What
a
a
ball.
time to be alive,
Yeah.
guys.
maybe we need to talk to our mayor to talk about.
Dana, if you're listening,
You need to talk some traveling gypsies to stay in town and entertain.
do you know any gypsies?
That's funny. Well, so we've talked that there was a hospital in there. There was apartments later in it.
Yeah, I think my grandmother, my dad's mom, she actually lived in the Savoy at one time. She in an apartment because she remembers, and it's so funny because she's like, "Oh, you." Whenever I told her, I was like, my dream is to reopen the Savoy," and she's like, "Oh, well, when I was like 18, I lived there and the laundry room was in the basement." And she said, "I just remember something touched my hand, and whenever I went to go flip the lights on, there was just roaches everywhere."
Oh, roaches! I thought you were going to say it was a ghost. I was like,
No.
I can see that.
No, it was just like there's just roaches all up in there. So she's convinced that they never got rid of any of roaches. But that was in probably
If the
when she was
radium don't get them.
if the radioactive roaches.
Well, that's what they say. After a nuclear fallout, the only thing that's
Yeah,
left are roaches.
Roaches and Twinkies.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Twinkie and Keith Richards.
And Keith Richards. Yeah, so she used to live there. I think it was around the time that it was still a hospital because she had some kind of small procedure. I don't know if it was appendicitis or anything like that, but she said that she remembers she got sick And she woke up. She was on the other side of the building. She was in the hospital.
It's pretty handy.
And then when she woke up again, she was back in her room. And like she said, it was pretty common to just see people wheeling gurneys down the hallways.
That would be a little unsettling.
That would freak me out. I wouldn't be okay with that. But yeah, it seems to be pretty common.
Yeah,
so.
Well, I was thinking earlier while you guys were talking about the radium stuff, but back then the level. Oh, I remember the first time I went to the dentist, I had just enough. My grandpa would tell me stories about going to the dentist whenever he was a kid, and they just pull teeth or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, putting those things together. If I lived back then and didn't have the medical care that we have today, I'd be like, yeah, let's go take a radium bath.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything
that
to
feel
leave
make me
this.
feel better. Yeah.
It'd make pulling teeth a lot better.
Apparently,
a lot easier.
they'd fall out.
Painless, yeah.
Your whole jaw will come
Just
out.
brush with radium.
Yeah.
But yeah, the willingness to do that kind of stuff with the technology that they had back then, it'd be totally. I can see drinking a lot of whiskey before getting teeth pulled for sure. Well, okay, radium baths. We talked about that. We talked about that it had burnt down 2 days before it was to open. We talked about where it's at, how much it costs to build. We talked about currently it seems like it's still under some kind of lawsuit or something. We know that there was a revitalization project like Save the Savoy back in the 1990s. So
I think Jay Mitchell had something kicked off for a while too, but since the roof accident, I don't think there's been any activity that's gone on until everything's settled on that. But there were 5 theaters in Nowata at one point. So.
Which would fill up a motel or a hotel or 2 or 3.
It was the Luxor.
Oh, the Luxor, yeah.
And the Rainbow and the Rex, and then there was a Royal around the corner.
Wow.
And there were 2 drive-in theaters.
One out east of town.
60.
And then there was one out there by the city park on the other side of that.
Can we bring back drive-in movies?
I don't know why not. The Admiral Twin seems to be doing
a
good
great.
enough business. Yeah.
They do wonderful. And it's such a cool thing for these young people that have no idea what a drive-in movie is.
Oh, it's an experience for
Yeah,
sure.
I'm sure like your kids probably...
We've been.
Yeah, and they were probably like, what is happening? So
I remember it very clearly because we were going to watch a double feature and I left my battery on so I could listen to the music or the audio over my radio, and it died.
I wonder if it's any coincidence that now that there are no drive-ins, they stopped making trunks in a lot of cars. So a lot of us used to get in.
that's the cheap way to get in the drive-in. You just hide in the back. And
Well, not to get off on my own little plugging stuff, but that's what the promotional trailer, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, if there's not a physical location, I'm hoping to take the trailer out to a park and have a 150-inch projector screen and speakers, and we could go out. We could resurrect some of this stuff to a degree, because a lot of people listen to this are like, yeah, that'd be cool. Oh my gosh, that was so awesome. We used to have this, and well, what's the difference between then and now? Is what I'm still struggling with. Is we can make this happen. It's just a matter of changing our choices, shopping locally. Going and spending your entertainment dollars here locally, but again, what are the things that we have? What are the things we don't have?
Well, years ago, people would stay at the Savoy because of business. They were in from out of town on business. It was a lot bigger world back then, so a lot of people would have to physically come to Nowata, sign
paperwork
and things like that. So they
everything's so digital now.
And so that was one aspect of it. I know that years later, when one of the next oil booms came in, late 70s, early 80s, something like that, Irene Ryan, Granny and the Beverly Hillbillies, she was an investor in oil fields out western Nowata County here.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
She had oil interests out there, and a lot of the investors would still come out then, and they would take them out to the oil fields. There was a lot of scamming going on, too, at that time.
Oh, I imagine.
They would drill a hole deep enough that you couldn't see the bottom, put some casing in there, throw some dry ice in there, and then they would take some of the clients around. Well, this one's got natural gas, and this has got natural gas, and all these holes. Well, they were getting $50,000 a hole to drill. And then they'd lay some pipeline out that didn't go anywhere, and they'd cover it up with dirt. And so she was one of them that got taken to the bank, I guess you might say. and lost quite a bit.
$50,000 a hole, that's really tempting.
Yeah.
I can
And
see
so
that.
by the time they got the entire oil field fired up, it was putting out a half a barrel a day.
That is
Like,
insane.
what's going on? So the FBI came out with backhoes and
The legit FBI.
yeah, and bulldozers. And by the time they got it all tore up, I mean, those guys were long gone, covered tracks, and nobody got a dime. You know, I mean, they obviously proved that there was fraud, but I don't think anybody ever paid for that except the investors.
Of course not.
So it's the American way.
Yeah, that's how that works.
You trusted us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was your fault.
That's right. So,
Well,
yeah,
guys-
a lot of stories like that, I'm sure. And then it was apartments, like say, in the 60s and 70s. I found a blog years ago, 2003, infancy of the internet, that this lady had written in Tulsa, and she was homeless, and she lived underneath some overpasses in different places, and finally made her way back up to no water, where she'd been in some sort of trouble, I guess. But she mentioned that she was living at the Savoy at one time, so that was about the mid-1970s, best I can recollect.
So when did it really start to decline?
Probably, I really don't know.
80s?
There wasn't much going on in it when we first moved here in '94, so. But it was relatively good shape then, you know.
Well, it had been able to be rebuilt at about that time, because then it was serviceable in 2000, something
For
like
prom.
that.
And it's really, I mean, it's not too far gone to save, really. The outside is still pretty good intact. They've done the roof repair. They put a new floor where the ballroom is. As far as restoring it to original condition with all the little round tiles and, you know, it just depends on how much money somebody can cough up that they want to put into it. But the exterior structure seems to be sturdy enough. I'm not seeing any signs of cracking or heaving or anything on the, you know, foundation-wise. I think if that was going to happen,
The
that
only
would
thing that kind of scares me, I used to work at Grand Lake, and I would pull into that parking lot where they took down the old Wesco. You remember
Oh, yeah, we bought
And-
furniture there.
that? Yeah. But that, I believe it's a northeast corner, there's a big old tree that I worry about the roots going in and getting into the foundation. But and those on the west side, those by the radium baths, is full of water. And they say that I've heard people say that the basement's full of water, but it's on a hill. How hard would it be to just drill a hole in the footing
Oh,
and let it
just flood
drain
it,
out?
flood Sweet Peas?
Flood Sweet Peas.
Yeah, let's do that. Sounds
No,
great.
It's far enough over there. It would just go like down the
It'll
street.
flood
or
the
something.
theater. It's fine.
But, yeah.
Flood Grand
But-
Lake.
Well, there's
I mean,
been
it could
so
be
much
pumped out.
groundwater this year because of
Oh, it's
the
coming from
rains
the
that
rain.
right up where on the first curve heading out 60, where Bunky Krause's house, the water seeping out of the top of the hill. But it's basically almost an artesian well right there. And a lot of people have remarked that, well, the city's had a leak in the water up there, and you know, it runs down into Delaware and down through there, but it's just coming right out of the side of the hill because of and I'm sure the Savoy basements are hard,
Yeah.
especially the one that's, you know,
Even if it
110 years
doesn't
old.
rain here, a lot of times our basement will flood. We have to keep our sump pump
groundwater.
going. Yeah, we have a well, and it just.
Should test it for radium, and
I know.
there's another
I'm
business.
I'm wondering if it has radium in it.
yeah.
Oh,
It's
I
super
imagine.
clear.
Yeah, and it glows. It's beautiful.
It's
at
beautiful.
night.
It's like bright green. Looks very fluorescent.
Well, we're over an hour right now, and I've had too much fun to even try to slow us down. But is there anything else of interest? I'm trying to think of, you know, if somebody's watching this, what is the entertainment value? What is the interest? What are the questions that maybe they would ask? Because if we're somebody that has looked at this and knows a lot, maybe a lot of times whenever we are trying to convey some of this stuff, we don't think about the questions that somebody that just doesn't know and are just curious and hadn't had the opportunity to research. Is there anything else you can think before we wrap it up?
To me, this is the most important building in our community. And it kind of was one of the foundation buildings that kind of just brought Nowata up from the dirt roads to the brick roads to the trolley to the,
boom.
I mean, we wouldn't have had
rise.
the rise of Nowata. I mean, we wouldn't have had so many of the things that we had we not probably had the Savoy. It brought in a lot of oilmen, brought in a lot of their families, brought in some rich people that wanted to take some radium baths and make their cheeks all rosy. And I mean, if you ever lived in the Savoy or had any procedures done there, or if you just have any stories, I would love to hear it personally. So I love it. Even if you have photos, that's how you can win my heart over, if you have photos.
Yeah, I'd like to see photos of the interior.
Especially the radium.
There's a lot of local history that is really a shame it's not really in the forefront. It's like right across the street from the Savoy at the Presbyterian Church is the oldest stained glass in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
That was done by an Italian master that actually
wasn't it out of Da Vinci's workshop or something like that?
No, he had Da Vinci stay at his home quite a bit. So I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of.
I'm sorry, I don't know this
influences.
story. Can we back up a little bit?
Oh yeah.
This is a whole nother podcast.
Can we do this next week?
Well, Mrs. Glass Mansion fame, she went to an auction from William Randolph Hearst.
I've heard that name.
Yep. William Randolph Hearst, and then he had a daughter, Patty, and she had a machine gun, and there were bank robberies, and
love it.
You know, there's a big story there too.
Shelby's big true crime podcast.
Yep.
Listen, that's all. If I'm doing anything, I'm listening to true crime podcasts.
All right.
That's all I care about.
Well,
and know what a history.
And know what a history.
Yep. So she went to auction at Gimbel's department store.
Wow.
And she bought the stained glass, and it was installed in the Presbyterian Church, and it's the oldest stained glass. I mean, clear back dates to Leonardo da Vinci.
That is insane. And
500
it's still intact.
years. 500 years ago, yeah.
And it's the one that you would see front and center when you drive by, correct?
Yeah, which one is it? Do you know?
The big rose window.
It's called the Crucified Christ. It was commissioned 500 years ago by a French duke whose frequent house guest was Italian master Leonardo da Vinci. The window eventually ended up in the art collection of William Randolph Hearst and was auctioned at Gimbel's department store, purchased by Mrs. J. Wood Glass. It hangs in the First Presbyterian Church in Nowata. The glass has been professionally certified as over 90% original.
Oh, wow.
That is insane.
And this church.
Yeah, it doesn't really look like that anymore. But
No, they've lost the tower.
Yeah.
And the parsonage.
Yeah.
Well, the rumor
And the pear tree.
the rumor that I've heard, and I mean, obviously that probably debunks most of it or whatever, but the way it was that I heard, and of course this is history, that, you know, to the spoils go, that, you know, whoever is the winner of the conflict
To
or
the
whatever gets
victor
to write
goes the spoil.
Yeah. But also gets to write the history or something like that. Anyways.
Yep.
But I've heard the local legend that it was originally, this is what I heard, that it was literally a Leonardo da Vinci. And I am a huge Leonardo da Vinci fan. I love his sketches. Those just mesmerize me. But I thought I knew a lot about Leonardo da Vinci at one point in my life. And then I hear that there's a Da Vinci in Nowata, which isn't necessarily true. But so you see how things get ramped up.
Well, we get excited.
It was a guy. Well, it wasn't really a Da Vinci, but he could have had some influence on how it was designed and made. And well, he just stayed at the guy's house that did it. And then, you know, I want to believe that it was a Da Vinci because it just makes me feel good, and I like the sound of that.
Makes you proud to be in Nowata.
But it's still super cool that it even has any association with Leonardo da Vinci at all.
There was a good Da Vinci display in Tulsa in the 1980s at the Philbrook I got to see. And just his pen and ink sketches were
They're mesmerizing.
humbling.
They're just like, oh my gosh.
He was a stand-up comedian as well.
What?
Yep, he was.
Yeah, I never believe what he says originally if it's just like it's something like that.
Yeah, if he's kidding or not.
You have to put the Paul filter on.
Pretty sure he also.
He was a stand-up.
No,
comedian?
he did stand-up
Yeah.
comedy. There's a good book on Da Vinci. One of his jokes was, people ask me why my paintings are so beautiful and my children are so ugly. He said, I make my paintings in the daytime. So, that's a 500-year-old joke, and I guess it's
That's pretty
It's
good.
still relevant today.
Still relevant, yeah.
That is awesome. That is so awesome.
Funny.
Well, is there anything else? I mean, we're at an hour and 15 minutes.
For
right
the
now.
future of the Savoy, sky's the limit. All it takes is money.
Right.
Hey, Reed Drummond, if you're listening, why don't you help a town out that's just down Highway 60 that has a lot of potential?
Well, we get the Savoy going, and then to get people to stay there, you've got to have a reason for them to be here.
Reason to come.
So
Well,
buy
I
a
mean-
dress and a guitar, and
there you go.
Get a cup of coffee at Wise Beans.
maybe get the Rex next.
Yes.
That would be a destination in itself, I would think. You know, if you had this gorgeous
Oh
ballroom
my God.
and you know, maybe some
To have events.
fountain and stuff.
Here's the thing is Nowata doesn't really have a place that's pretty to have events. We get a lot of brides that come into Sweet Peas and are like, where is a good place for me to get married? And I'm like, I wish I had that answer. I would love to tell you, you can just go down the street and go to Savoy where they had those gorgeous Art Deco, beautiful.
You can put a chapel in the ice cream store.
Yeah. Yeah.
and Paul will dress up like Elvis and marry you.
Hey,
Thank
you know
very
what?
much.
People will pay for that. People will do it. Yeah.
It's for me, it's just one more idea that could click and just work. Anybody that knows me knows
We're
that I'm
just-
full of ideas, but
We're just hoping and praying
have
that
the means to
somebody
accomplish
with
them.
money is listening that has a little bit of sympathy for us.
the other thing that kills me is I grew up carpentering and I can do a lot of things, and there's a lot of things in a lot of these buildings that just blows my mind that they're not getting fixed and updated. Because if you don't,
It's gonna
yeah,
fall
it'll
apart.
be fine for another 5 years, but what else is rotting underneath that wood
Yeah.
or whatever the situation may be? How do
Well,
we preserve it?
And it's a
And I
big
can
problem
do it.
because
I can do a lot of it, not
the value of a building. I mean, I don't know what the value of our building is even right now. I guess I just don't care. But the problem is, you can put $200,000 into one of these old downtown buildings,
Nobody will ever pay for it to
and
get it
then
back.
it's worth $75,000.
Yeah.
And
It's
so,
the density. if
unless
there's other things around
right,
it,
Yeah.
unless everybody follows true to form, well, everybody's gonna have $200,000 to put into a building to do the restoration and stuff. If everybody does, and part of the problem too is years ago the IRS restructured tax breaks for donating not only to 501c3s but matching grants, all sorts of things that have been restructured. So there's not that much incentive for somebody that has a lot of money to start dumping it into a place for
To an
a tax
individual.
break.
Yeah,
right?
it makes more sense to not restore it. If
well,
that's,
if we had 3 or 4 different places doing that exact same thing at the same time, then it may create that density of, oh, we got this amazing hotel, we got this awesome guitar shop slash
Well, and there are
ice
a lot
cream
of new
shop. We got
things.
the coffee shop over here.
Yep, a
If
lot of new
everybody had a
things in
bunch of
Nowata. I guess there's
The
going to be a
Jubilee.
soda shop opening. There's be an ice cream store. You got Sweet Peas. You have the music store. So we've got, our bait shop's looking pretty nice. There's a lot of things that
yeah.
on the upswing.
starting.
Yeah.
So I loved the sound of Nowata Rising. Has that been a thing, or does that just?
I don't know.
It sounds like
Can we make it a
sounds like a
thing?
movie title. Maybe that's the name of the podcast, Nowata Rising, because the whole reason we talk about
Love it.
history is so we don't repeat the mistakes. But
That's the idea, Marcus.
yeah. So maybe that's the concept going forward with this podcast is. Here's what we had before. This is how it happened. This is, technology is different nowadays, but still everything kind of follows a formula. And, if you build it, they will come kind of Field of Dreams mentality. And if everybody works together towards a similar goal and puts their effort and money and passion and everything for this community going forward at the same time, an ice cream shop downtown is not going to hurt your soda jerk shop. I think it's just going to add to the atmosphere. If we had,
Sure.
If we had, the coffee shops there, and then you got some music playing, which everybody loves your music playing whenever they walk by.
Absolutely.
It makes it feel like there's stuff going on in town.
We have so many customers that come in and they're just like, Paul's music makes us, and it brings us in the mood to shop. And then they come in here and we play classic rock at Sweet Peas. People are like, I'm glad you don't play country music. That gets boring. And I'm like, yeah, I can't do it all day. I just can't. Give me some Aerosmith.
We put out a pretty big variety.
You do, and
most of it's probably classic rock, but Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. There's a guy that yodels once in a while. That I think he gave one person whiplash that was walking down the street.
I was walking outside to go to lunch one day, and I just started hearing this beautiful yodeling. It's like,
that's
okay.
kind of a contradiction
All
in
right.
terms, but yeah.
All right. I was like,
Corky,
wow.
Corky Davis came in one day and he said, that's pretty loud right by the front door there. And he said, that's Bob Wills. I said, yeah. He goes, anybody ever complain? I said, oh, yeah. The neighbor called the sheriff one day and said they were playing Bob Wills out there on the street too loud. And he goes, really? I said, what'd they do? I said, they come down and arrested him.
Bob Wills jokes.
Yeah, but there's a big variety. What happens generally is that they'll be playing some old big band tune or something when the kids come in, and then they'll be playing some metal tune when Corky comes in, and I'm probably just making everybody mad. But,
I love it.
But everybody seems to enjoy it, I guess.
Yeah,
so
everybody
I've never
enjoys
heard
it.
anything negative about
I've
it.
never heard anybody say, I wish that guy would stop playing so loud.
Oh yeah, it makes it feel like it's the atmosphere. It's among everything.
It brings everybody kind of together downtown. It does.
Well, we got off on a little tangent there, but I think it makes a lot of sense. Maybe, if anybody out there has a suggestion on what this podcast should be called, I think learning from our history, being proud of our history, trying not to make the same mistakes, and trying to build off of the good things, and revitalizing some interest into downtown and the activities that potentially could be there. And I think it'd be really cool to call it Know It Rising, because we could just spearhead that the beginning of something new and fresh, and but yet also a throwback to our history.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I love talking about then and now. I mean, the building that the coffee shop's in used to be a dentist office, a dry goods store, and a dress shop. My grandmother bought her wedding dress upstairs. So
yeah, it's just
crazy.
Constant stories like that. It's so awesome.
there were still dress forms up there not too many years
yes,
ago. Yeah.
there was. I got to go in the attic because I'm good friends with Sam and Ashley. So the owners of the coffee shop, and Dustin Perrette, who owns the building, and he was like, "Hey, you can go upstairs. I don't care." There was a foyer in the back. So it was kind of like a halfway up between the levels. And I got to go up there, and it was kind of like an office. And it was so creepy. They tore it all out. But it is so creepy. Like, they had like a bathroom and like a little office. And there was like, I don't know, 10 mannequins up there that were
that
just
would be,
like from the 40s. You know, it was like...
The foyer,
Yeah.
actually the foyer in that building used to be open.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a chess tournament in there about Christmas time. And the people that were the better chess players used to brag about it, and they used to call it chestnuts boasting in an open foyer.
That's good. That's really good, actually.
But
Well, I would love to tell some stories about the city drug building, but we'll save that for another podcast. Are you guys good? I mean,
I'm good.
I know people that tune into podcasts will watch a 2-hour podcast.
I do.
I know that for a fact. I mean,
I'm one of
you're
them.
not the only person.
yeah, I have no life, so.
Yeah. I like listening when I'm doing other things. Like, makes me
Right.
clean my house really good.
Right, and that's another thing that I've thought about, of pulling the audio out of it, and people could watch the video if they wanted, and then just audio if you want to put it on your.
I think
phone
that
or
would be a
whatever.
wonderful idea.
We gotta
I know it's a
figure out a few
lot more
things.
work.
Well, it's really not necessarily. It's just a matter of what platform. If I just put
Yeah.
it on YouTube or whatever. But is there anything else about the Savoy that we're like, darn it, we should have said something about that, or we can always
What's
come
the
back
future
and
going to
readdress
be?
it.
The future is, I mean, it's hard to say. It really depends on the owner. A lot of people think, oh, No Water tears down this, or No Water this, or No Water that. It's not No Water. They're private business owners, and it's basically it's their private property,
Right.
commercial property and or not. It is up to them to decide. And I mean, you're looking at a tremendous amount of money to fix that place up.
Well, and the owner doesn't.
So-
He doesn't live here, correct? He lives in California, right?
It's back and forth. I don't know where he claims residence, but
Yeah.
he's here frequent enough, I suppose, I guess. But Yeah, it would be nice to get it pushed off high center. Last I knew, there was probably a pending lawsuit from the accident that's going to have to be
taken care of,
resolved before it gets any further progress and stuff. But I think it's probably at a pivot point right now that if something isn't done before too long, at least for the most part, it's fairly weather tight at this point.
So the roof is good. Did they
Yes,
get
the roof is
the
good.
flooring is
They've replaced the floor in
replaced. So
in
that's
the
good.
ballroom and that roof. So
the roof is like such a big expense anyway. You know, if somebody was to go in and kind of maybe give it a little TLC, the roof is a big expense that's taken care of already.
Yep.
So whenever you say the roof, there's that first floor, and it has a roof.
So
Are you
it's-
talking about that one or the one on the U-shape?
I think
where
all
the
of them.
apartments
I
were?
think the U-shape and the ballroom roof.
right, the top floor roof, the highest roof, apparently has been redone. I mean, that's where the accident had happened. But
And that's still.
I know when there were
strong.
still apartments in there functioning, that's when it began to leak. And I know that Chuck fought that roof for several years, trying to keep, pulling this up and pulling that up and trying to keep. But once that water starts to wear on the structure of the roof up there, then boy,
Right.
you got big expense and big problems. It's
Well,
got to be.
A lot of the third and second story windows are open, and
Yeah, that bothers
you
me.
so creepy.
Pigeons, the pigeons are.
Yeah, you know that nature's going in and out. So I would just hope that somebody would get in and seal those windows up. Because if they're going to go ahead and repair the roofs and the floors and things like that, then there's not really any point unless you seal. And I don't want you guys to brick it in. I don't know who
pigeons
comes
haven't
up
been-
with that.
Pigeons haven't been as big a problem since we lost the feed store as
Right.
far as
Oh,
downtown.
I
Right.
didn't know that.
Yep, they used to.
Man, they were thick.
Yeah, they used to circle in the morning and circle in the evenings, and
Yeah.
I'll be darned.
they
I-
roosted.
Now that I think about it, I don't even remember. I don't know the last time I seen a pigeon around here. I'll be darned. Okay.
We have some huge bats.
I
There-
believe that.
There are two bats that have been here for quite a few years as a pair, and their wingspan is, I don't know.
Stop it.
No, I mean,
Oh
they're,
my God.
they're every bit of 2 feet wingspan,
Oh,
and you can actually hear them
Flapping?
flapping.
where do they
And
live?
Pretty close because they come over the top of our building.
Maybe they live in the Savoy.
Just,
Maybe it's Dracula.
it's generally about 10 o'clock in the
Start some
evenings
new
we go out
references.
there. And we've seen them almost every year for the last 10 years, unless it's not the same pair, but there's always a pair. There was a white owl that lived on top of the Savoy,
That is so
or
cool.
not the Savoy, the Rex at one time. They would hunt off there and you could hear them.
These are the familiars of these night
This
creatures.
is just,
I
We're
mean, the
gonna
bats
stop
are
it.
great because they'll tear
Eat those
out the
mosquitoes.
bugs. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And there's purple martins that dive around here about dusk, and
It's great.
a lot of things go on downtown.
Yeah, that
Awesome.
people don't know about.
Yep.
Well, I think we've about covered it. Can you
Yep.
think of anything else, Shelby?
No, other than just if you got more information, we want to know about it. Or at least I want to know about it.
That'd be great to see some interior photos
Yeah,
of
just
years gone past.
Pictures that
So, do you think a good idea would be, hey, community, if you hung in there with us for coming up on an hour and a half, of course, there's social media and stuff out there that people can comment on, and I'll put this on YouTube and then I'll share it to Facebook and everything. But comment on something, not only things that have to do with the Savoy, but also what maybe you would like to see next. Because if we get an overwhelming,
please do this building
influx
next,
of,
or
oh, we got to talk about the Campbell now, or
Yeah.
we got to talk about the rec center, whatever. Then that'll give us a little bit of time to look into it, and I'm sure at some point we're going to be partnering with the Historical Society at some point, and that'd be a great resource. We just figured we'd keep it small and keep it, just a fun little conversation about what we know, and then over time, if there's a lot of interest built up, which I really, fingers crossed, hope so, that we can get some direct feedback from the community and see what they would like to hear about, and then that just gives us more pertinent information to focus on and talk about to keep it fun and interesting. But And then Shelby had mentioned we're going to start doing an Instagram. Probably 2020. I got a 12-day break coming up that hopefully I can get a bunch of stuff figured out for the TV station.
So while he's off
for
work,
2020.
I'll be working.
Yeah. Well, I'll be working. I'll just be doing TV station stuff. But other than that, swing by and come in and visit with Shelby and Paul, but also they have a business to run, so be respectful of that. I sick people on you at the basketball games to go stump you with any Leon Russell or Beatles trivia, and so maybe I'm sending people in there just to chew up your time. But
Please don't.
But support local businesses. That's
But if
the
you're
whole
buying
idea.
stuff, we would love to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as that credit card's out, keep the conversation going. But again, that's part of what we're here to do, not only to talk about history because it's fun and we enjoy doing this kind of stuff, but also to promote local businesses. Like I said, today we're obviously at Shelby's Sweet Peas, and next time maybe we'll be over at Paul's, or next time we might go to City Drug, or we might go to Ranch Supply, or whoever else that is interested in doing it. And it's all about, if there's a lot of feedback from the community, then we'll do that. It's fun, it's an easy way to get attention to our local businesses and help know it out a little bit. And I think we'll still brainstorm on Know What a Rising or whatever we end up calling it. But this will be episode 1 and it's in the can. You guys need anything else, or
No.
we good to go?
I'm fine.
All right. Well, it's been an hour and 31 minutes at this point. We appreciate you guys from tuning in, and thank you to Paul Hughes and Shelby Black. Of course, Shelby Black / Sweet Peas and Paul Hughes, Capstone Music. And we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. And thanks for hanging in there and watching with us, guys. And we will talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
I got to figure out a cooler way to end that, and intro and all that stuff. But